I let my brother live in my apartment for a few weeks while he got back on his feet. A month later, his girlfriend changed the locks, made a list of house rules, and told me to knock before entering my own home. Please stay with me as I tell you my story, and please don't forget to support our channel by subscribing, liking, and sharing with your loved ones. When I first handed Evan the extra key, I honestly thought I was doing a good thing. He'd just gone through a rough breakup, lost his job, and sounded like a ghost on the phone. Quiet, broken, like the version of him I remembered from childhood had packed up and left. I had space. I had a steady job at the hospital. What was the harm in helping my own brother for a few weeks? At first, it was fine. He slept on the couch, made me coffee in the mornings, even fixed a leaking faucet I'd been ignoring for months. We laughed again like we used to, and for a moment, it felt like family meant something real. But then he met her, Mila Harper. She came over one night for dinner, polite smile, big eyes, soft voice. The kind of girl who looks harmless until you realize her smile doesn't quite reach her eyes. I didn't think much of it then. Evan deserved happiness. But little by little, she became a fixture. First, her toothbrush appeared in the bathroom, then a drawer in the dresser. Then her shoes lined up by the door like she'd always lived there. I told myself it was temporary. She'd go home eventually. But home, apparently, had become my apartment. One Friday evening, I came home from a double shift at the hospital, bone-tired and ready to collapse. When I tried to unlock the door, the key wouldn't turn. I jiggled it, frowned, tried again. Nothing. Confused, I knocked. I could hear music inside, Mila's voice laughing. When Evan opened the door, his face was pale. Behind him, Mila leaned on the kitchen counter, like she was hosting a housewarming party. "Oh," she said sweetly, "we had the locks changed. You should have gotten the message." "The what?" I asked, stunned. "It's for safety," Mila said, brushing invisible dust from her sleeve. Too many people had keys. I stared at my own brother. "This is my apartment, Evan." He looked away, mumbling something about things being complicated. Then I saw it, the list taped to the fridge. "House rules," it said in bold letters. Rule 1, knock before entering shared areas. Rule 2, respect private spaces. Rule 3, quiet hours start at 8 p.m. My name wasn't even on the bottom where it said approved by. Just Mila's neat handwriting, looping and confident. That was the moment something in me cracked. Not loudly, not all at once, just a quiet fracture deep down where trust used to live. I didn't say anything that night. I just stared at the list, then at them, and realized my mistake wasn't letting them in. My mistake was believing they'd ever leave. When I woke up the next morning, the apartment didn't feel like mine anymore. Mila's voice echoed from the kitchen, giving orders to Evan like she'd lived there her whole life. The smell of coffee filled the air, but it wasn't the warm, comforting smell I used to love. It felt foreign, sharp, like I was standing in someone else's home. Mila smiled when she saw me. "Morning," she said casually, like nothing had happened. I looked at the new silver lock on the door and asked, "Why did you change it without telling me?" She tilted her head. "It's just for safety. You never know who might still have an old key." Evan was at the table, staring into his mug. He didn't say a word until I looked at him directly. "She's right," he finally said. "You're overreacting, Nora. It's not a big deal." I couldn't believe it. My brother, the same one I'd taken in when he had nowhere to go, was siding with her. I swallowed my anger and walked to the fridge where the house rules list still hung. Mila had added new ones overnight. No unannounced guests. Keep your stuff in your room. And the last one. Everyone must respect shared spaces. I could almost laugh. What shared spaces? She had taken over all of them. That day, I tried to act normal. I went to work, came home, cooked dinner quietly, and stayed out of their way. But every time I looked around, something had changed. My old throw blanket was gone. The framed photo of me and Evan as kids had disappeared from the hallway. The bookshelf I'd spent a weekend assembling was pushed against the wall to make room for Mila's giant vanity table. The apartment was shrinking around me. When I confronted Evan that night, he brushed me off again. Mila's just trying to make it nice, he said. You've been working too much. Maybe you're just stressed. Stressed, I repeated. She's rearranging my home, Evan. She threw away my things. He sighed and rubbed his forehead like I was the problem. You don't get it, Nora. She's been through a lot. She needs stability. I wanted to scream. And what about me? This is my place. But Mila walked in just then, all calm and collected. You don't need to raise your voice, she said softly. We're just trying to make this work for everyone. She reached out, touching Evan's arm, and I saw it. The way he softened instantly, the way his eyes followed hers like he was under a spell. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing their laughter from the living room. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, feeling smaller and smaller. It wasn't just the apartment I was losing, it was my brother too. Over the next week, things got worse. Mila took over my parking space, saying she needed it for safety reasons. She began sorting through the mail, setting aside letters that weren't hers with little sticky notes saying handled. I came home one day to find one of my old jackets in a trash bag by the door. When I asked where it came from, Mila shrugged. It looked worn out. Evan barely spoke to me anymore unless Mila was around. And when he did, his tone was cold, distant. I started wondering if she was controlling him somehow, feeding him lies, turning him against me piece by piece. One evening, I walked into the living room and saw Mila sitting at my desk, typing on my laptop. She looked up and said, "Don't worry, I'm just organizing some things." I didn't even have the energy to argue. I went back to my room, locked the door behind me, and sat on the edge of the bed. The apartment was quiet except for the hum of the fridge and their muffled voices outside. I realized I wasn't living in my home anymore. I was surviving in it. And that was the moment I knew. I couldn't let this continue. Something had to change, and soon. I came home from another long day at work and saw that the list on the fridge had grown longer. The paper was now covered with neat bullet points in Mila's handwriting, printed and laminated like it was something official. I stood there reading each rule slowly, hoping I was imagining things. Rule 1. No loud noise after 9. Rule 2. No guests unless everyone agrees. Rule 3. Keep the kitchen clean at all times. Rule 4. Respect private spaces. And then the one that made me stop breathing for a second, Rule 5. Mila will use the master bedroom for personal reasons. I stared at that last one for a long time. The master bedroom had always been mine. It was the only place I could rest after 12-hour hospital shifts. I walked down the hall and opened the door. My things were stacked against the wall, and Mila's clothes were hanging neatly in my closet. Her perfume filled the room. My bed had new sheets I didn't recognize. Evan was sitting on the edge of the bed, scrolling through his phone. I asked quietly, "What's this? Why is she in my room?" He didn't even look up. "She needs more space, Nora. She's not comfortable in the smaller room. You don't have much stuff anyway." I tried to stay calm. "It's not about stuff, Evan. It's about respect. This is my home. You both were supposed to be staying here temporarily." He sighed and finally looked at me, irritation written all over his face. "You're making everything so difficult. Mila's just trying to make it work. You're the one who keeps turning things into drama." Before I could say another word, Mila walked in behind me. "If it's such a big deal," she said in that soft voice that always sounded fake, "I'll move back to the smaller room. But honestly, it just makes more sense for us to share the larger space. We're a couple." Her tone was calm, but her eyes dared me to argue. Evan immediately jumped in, saying, "No, she's right. It's logical." I looked between them, realizing it wasn't logic, it was control. Every change, every rule, every word was designed to push me out without saying it directly. I wanted to shout. I wanted to remind him who paid the rent, who owned the place, who had given him a roof when he had nothing. But instead, I just stood there, frozen, while Mila smiled like she'd already won. Later that night, I tried to talk to Evan alone. I told him she was taking advantage of him, twisting things to make me the bad guy. He slammed his hand on the table and said, "You don't know her. She's been more supportive than you've ever been." That sentence hit harder than anything else. My own brother, the same kid I used to protect from bullies, the one I shared cereal with when we were little, was yelling at me because of her. I didn't even recognize his voice anymore. I didn't argue back. I just sat there quietly while he stormed off. The apartment felt heavier than ever. I could hear Mila laughing softly from the next room, whispering something to him that made him calm down again. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay awake in the smaller room, staring at the ceiling, listening to the hum of the city outside. The walls felt closer, the air thicker. Every sound from the other room reminded me that I was losing my home inch by inch. But somewhere between anger and heartbreak, a cold clarity settled in. I realized begging or fighting wouldn't fix this. I needed to think smarter, not louder. They had taken over everything, my space, my peace, even my brother. But I wasn't going to let them keep it. I didn't know how yet, but I promised myself one thing before I finally closed my eyes. I was going to get my apartment back. And this time, I'd do it on my terms. After that last fight, I stopped arguing. There was no point. Every time I tried to speak up, Evan twisted my words or Mila stepped in pretending to be calm and reasonable. So I changed my approach. I started acting like I didn't care. I came home, smiled politely, and stayed out of their way. I didn't question what they did anymore. I wanted them to think they'd won. At first, it worked. Mila seemed relaxed, almost smug. She started walking around like she owned the place. She'd host little dinners with her friends, calling it our apartment. I stayed quiet and observed. The more I watched, the more I saw things that didn't add up. She never once paid a dime toward the bills. Evan promised to help with rent, but always had an excuse. His paycheck was late. He was short on cash. He'd make it up next month. Months passed and nothing changed. One afternoon, I came home early from work and caught Mila talking on the phone in the living room. She didn't see me at first. "Yeah," she said, laughing. "It's practically ours already. Evan and I are planning to buy it soon. The place has so much potential once we remodel." I stood quietly in the hallway, trying not to let my shock show. "Buy it?" She didn't even know I owned the place outright. My name was the only one on the papers. After that, I started taking notes. Every late rent payment, every broken item, every time something of mine went missing, I wrote it down. I began snapping pictures of the damage, too. The scratches on the hardwood floor, the hole in the wall from one of their arguments, the pile of my clothes dumped in a box in the closet. One day, I noticed my grandmother's old clock was gone from the living room shelf. It was a small thing, but it meant everything to me. When I asked Evan about it, he shrugged and said Mila thought it was too old-fashioned. I later saw it listed for sale online under Mila's account. That was the moment I stopped feeling sad and started feeling angry. Not the kind of anger that explodes, but the quiet kind that plans. From that day on, I kept my distance but stayed alert. I avoided conversations and made myself invisible. They thought I was broken down, tired, or maybe even scared. But I was just waiting and watching. Mila's confidence grew each week. She talked about our bedroom, our kitchen, our next home. She even told her friends that she was thinking about getting her name on the lease. I would listen from my room, keeping a straight face, even when every word made my stomach turn. Evan had changed too. He looked worn out, constantly trying to please her. Sometimes I caught glimpses of the old him, the quiet brother who used to make me laugh, but those moments were rare. Mostly, he just avoided me, probably out of guilt. I didn't confront him again. I couldn't. Not yet. If I wanted my home back, I needed to be careful. Mila was cunning and loved playing the victim. If I pushed too soon, she'd twist everything around. So, I smiled when she talked about remodeling the kitchen. I nodded when she mentioned painting the walls. I even pretended to agree when she said the living room needed a woman's touch. Inside, I was counting down the days until I could take it all back. Every night before bed, I went over my notes. I checked my pictures, added dates, wrote down details. It became my quiet routine, gathering proof of what they'd done. The apartment was filled with their noise and laughter, but I was the only one who knew what was coming. They thought I was powerless. They thought I'd given up. But I was just waiting for the right moment. The calm before the storm was almost over. The day I finally acted, everything was quiet. I had gathered every piece of proof I needed, and the lawyer confirmed what I already knew. They had no legal right to stay. The apartment was mine, and now it was time to remind them of that. I went to the courthouse, filled out the eviction papers, and waited for the officer to deliver the notice. My hands shook a little when I signed the last page, not from fear, but from the weight of what it meant. I was done being the quiet one. That evening, I came home just as the officer taped the notice to the front door. The sound of the paper sticking to the wood felt like a door closing on everything I had put up with. Mila came into the hallway holding a cup of coffee, looking amused. "What's that supposed to be?" she asked. "It's an eviction notice," I said calmly. "You both have 2 weeks to move out." Her eyes widened for a second, then she smirked. "You're serious?" She looked over her shoulder, calling out, "Evan, your sister's lost it. Come look at this." Evan stepped out from the living room, his face pale. He read the paper once, then again, like he couldn't understand what he was seeing. "Nora," he said quietly, "you're not really doing this, are you? We have nowhere to go." I kept my tone even. "You've had months to figure something out. I warned you both." He rubbed his eyes, his voice shaking. "Please, just give us more time. Mila's been struggling. We'll start paying, I swear." Before I could answer, Mila laughed softly. "Oh, come on. You're not actually going to make your own brother homeless, are you?" Her voice had that fake sweetness I'd learned to hate. "Besides," she added, stepping closer, "you can't kick me out of my home." That word, made something in me snap. She said it so casually, like she believed it. Like she'd already forgotten whose name was on the lease, whose paycheck covered the bills, whose furniture she'd sold. Evan looked between us, torn and silent. I could see he wanted to defend her, but knew deep down she'd gone too far. Mila didn't care. She was enjoying every second, smiling like she was testing how much she could still control me. "You've got 14 days, I said quietly. "After that, if you're still here, the police will remove you." She folded her arms. "You can try." Then she brushed past me and slammed the door to my bedroom, her new favorite habit. Evan stayed in the hallway, his shoulders slumped. "I didn't think you'd actually do it," he said softly. "I didn't think you'd let it get this far," I replied. He didn't answer. He just stood there looking lost. For a second, I almost felt sorry for him. He looked like the little boy who used to follow me around when we were kids, scared and unsure. But then I remembered the months of silence, the broken things, the way he'd looked away every time she disrespected me. I went to my room and shut the door. Through the wall, I could hear them arguing, her angry voice his desperate one. The same pattern, the same loop. I sat on my bed, letting the sound fade, feeling both relief and exhaustion. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel powerless. But the satisfaction was short-lived. I knew Mila wouldn't leave quietly. She'd fight, manipulate, twist the story like she always did. She wanted control, and losing it would make her dangerous. Still, I was ready. She thought she could push me out of my own home, but I was done playing her game. That night, as I looked at the eviction notice still taped to the door, I made a silent promise to myself. I wouldn't just take back my apartment. I'd make sure they remembered what it cost them to betray me. They thought they'd broken me, but they had no idea what was coming next. After the eviction notice, everything inside the apartment turned quiet. Mila didn't speak to me directly anymore, and Evan avoided eye contact. The silence was thick, but I could tell they were planning something. So I decided to play along. I stopped being angry on the outside. I started being friendly again, calm and polite, as if I had changed my mind. One morning, I made coffee for everyone. Mila looked surprised when I handed her a cup. "We don't have to fight," I said lightly. "We can talk this out like adults." Her expression softened just enough for me to know she believed me. I could almost see her guard dropping. That was what I needed. Over the next few days, I acted nice. I asked Mila for her opinion on things around the apartment, agreed with her when she spoke, and pretended I cared about keeping peace. Evan looked relieved at first, thinking things might go back to normal. Mila, however, grew confident again, which was exactly what I wanted. One evening, while sitting in the living room, she started talking too much. She bragged about how she had fixed the apartment after I neglected it. I listened, nodding as she went on. Honestly, she said, sipping her drink, if I hadn't changed the locks, who knows who could have broken in. You're welcome, by the way. I kept my face still, though my pulse quickened. I had my phone recording in my pocket. She didn't stop there. Oh, and that old furniture you had? I sold some of it. It was just taking up space. Don't worry, I'll replace it once we take over the lease. She laughed softly. It's better this way. Every word was proof. I just needed her to keep talking. Later, she mentioned using my name for the electric bill. It's easier that way, she said casually. You already had the account. I just updated it. Saves time. I smiled like I agreed, but inside I was burning. She was openly admitting everything I needed to expose her. The next day, Evan came to my room when Mila was out. He looked tired, his eyes red. I can't keep doing this, he said quietly. She's different when you're not around. He told me how Mila had taken his debit card, saying she'd handle the bills, but he hadn't seen his money since. She checked his messages, made him block old friends, and accused him of betraying her whenever he disagreed. I stayed quiet, letting him talk. For the first time in months, he sounded like himself again. I know she's wrong, he said, his voice breaking. But if I leave her, I have nothing. She said she'll ruin me if I try. Hearing that almost made me pity him, but I knew sympathy wouldn't fix this. He needed to see what she really was, not just be told. Evan, I said carefully, I have something you should listen to soon. But not yet. Trust me. He nodded weakly, not asking questions. I could tell he was torn between love and guilt. For the next few days, I kept pretending. I laughed at Mila's small jokes, thanked her for cooking, even asked her advice about redecorating. The more she felt in control, the less careful she became. Every conversation gave me another piece of her lies. When she bragged again about handling my bills, I smiled. When she complained about how messy I used to be before she fixed the apartment, I agreed. Inside, I was already planning the next move. I didn't want to destroy Evan. I wanted to free him. But I knew it wouldn't happen through talking or begging. He had to see the truth in a way that couldn't be denied. So, I kept the recordings safe, ready for the right moment. Mila thought I was finally on her side. She had no idea she was giving me everything I needed to end her game for good. The morning I decided to act, I felt strangely calm. There was no anger left, only focus. Everything had been arranged, the locksmith, the officer, and a few hours when I knew Evan and Mila would be gone. I left work early, met the locksmith outside the building, and handed him the paperwork showing the apartment was in my name. The officer waited nearby, watching quietly. The sound of the drill was quick, almost soft, as the old lock came off. I stood in the hallway, breathing slowly, watching the pieces of metal fall away. When the new lock clicked into place, it felt like the air inside the apartment shifted. For the first time in months, the place was mine again. I walked through each room, seeing the mess they had left behind. Clothes piled on chairs, dishes crusted in the sink, and empty bottles under the table. I didn't feel sad anymore. I just started packing. Their things went into boxes, neatly labeled with their names. The officer helped me move them by the door. Before leaving, I taped a restraining notice on the outside wall, warning them not to re-enter without permission. Everything was legal, clear, and final. I had just finished when I heard voices echoing from the hall. My stomach tightened. Evan's voice came first, low and uncertain, then Mila's sharp tone cutting through his words. The elevator doors opened, and they both stepped out. Evan froze when he saw the officer standing beside me. Mila's face twisted immediately. "What the hell is this?" she snapped, stepping forward. "It's done," I said quietly. "You can collect your things and leave." She glanced at the officer, then at the boxes by the door. "You can't do this," she hissed. This is my home too. The officer stepped forward calmly. Ma'am, this apartment belongs to Miss Collins. You're being asked to leave. Please collect your belongings. Mila's voice rose. You don't understand. She's kicking us out for no reason. We've been living here for months. I stayed silent. Evan looked lost, his eyes darting between us. Nora, he whispered. Please, can't we just talk about this? There's nothing left to talk about, I said. I warned you both. You didn't listen. Mila shoved one of the boxes, making it topple over. You think this is over? You'll regret this, I swear. Her voice cracked with rage. The officer moved closer. Ma'am, calm down. You need to leave peacefully. But she didn't listen. She pointed at me, shaking. You think you're smarter than everyone. You think you can just erase me. I looked her straight in the eye. You did that to yourself. For a moment, it was silent except for the hum of the lights. Then Evan grabbed Mila's arm, trying to pull her back. Stop, he said quietly. Just stop. It's over. She yanked her arm free and glared at him. You're really siding with her? He didn't answer. He just lowered his head, defeated. The officer finally guided Mila toward the elevator. She shouted over her shoulder, calling me every name she could think of. Her voice echoed down the hall until the doors closed, and the sound disappeared. Evan stood there, staring at the boxes. He looked smaller than I'd ever seen him. I didn't mean for it to go this far, he said. I know, I replied. But you let it. He nodded slowly, eyes glistening. I'll come back for my stuff later. That's fine, I said, stepping aside. When he left, the hallway went quiet again. I locked the door, the new key cool in my hand. Inside, the apartment was still a mess, but it was peaceful. The smell of her perfume was fading, replaced by something cleaner, lighter. I sat on the couch for a long time, not moving. Everything felt different, not joyful, not yet, but steady. I didn't feel like a victim anymore. I had finally taken back what was mine. And even though I knew there might still be trouble ahead, I also knew one thing for sure. Mila would never step through that door again. After they were gone, the apartment felt strange. The silence was heavy at first, almost unfamiliar. Every corner reminded me of the chaos that had filled it for months. The air smelled like dust and cleaning spray instead of perfume and cigarettes. For the first time in a long while, I could hear my own thoughts. I started with small things. I opened all the windows and let the cold air move through the rooms. Then I began cleaning, not just to remove the mess they'd left, but to feel in control again. I threw out every broken item, every piece of furniture they had damaged. The more I scrubbed and swept, the more the place started to look like my home again. On my day off, I went to a paint store and chose a pale green color for the walls. It took me 2 days to finish painting, but when I stood back and looked around, the change was worth it. The rooms looked brighter, softer, like they had finally been freed. I made a list of things I'd lost: the furniture Mila sold, the decorations she threw out, the old keepsakes that had disappeared. Slowly, I began to replace them. Some I bought secondhand. Others I found packed away in closets, hidden under piles of junk they had left behind. One afternoon, I opened a box they'd shoved in the storage space. Inside were a few of my things: a photo frame with a picture of me and Evan as kids, an old recipe book from Mom, and the small clock that had belonged to Grandma. It had a tiny crack in the glass, but it still ticked when I wound it. Finding it felt like uncovering a part of myself I'd lost. Days turned into weeks. The apartment stayed quiet, but not in a lonely way. I cooked for myself, read in the evenings, and slept peacefully. Work felt lighter. For the first time in months, I didn't dread coming home. Evan hadn't called since that day in the hallway. Part of me was angry, but another part just felt tired. I figured he needed time to face what he'd done. I didn't expect to see him again. Then one night there was a knock on the door. It was soft, hesitant. When I opened it, Evan was standing there alone. He looked thinner, pale, like he hadn't been eating or sleeping much. He didn't say anything at first, just held his hands in his pockets and stared at the floor. "Can I come in?" he finally asked. I stepped aside. He walked in slowly, glancing around the apartment. It was clean and warm, nothing like the mess he had left behind. "It looks different," he said quietly. "It feels different," I replied. He nodded, eyes glistening. "I owe you an apology," he said. "I didn't see what she was doing. I thought she cared about me. But she used me, Nora. She took everything. My money's gone, my car's gone, even my job." His voice cracked. "She told me you were against me. I believed her. I'm so sorry." I watched him struggle to speak. The anger I'd carried for months started to fade a little. He wasn't the same person I'd faced that night. He looked broken, honest, and ashamed. "I know," I said quietly. "I tried to warn you." He nodded. "You were right about everything." We sat in silence for a while. I poured him a glass of water, and he thanked me softly. For the first time in a long time, we didn't argue. There was nothing left to fight about. Before leaving, he looked around one last time. "You made it a home again," he said. When the door closed behind him, I stood there for a moment, listening to the quiet. The apartment no longer felt empty. It felt like peace, the kind that comes when the storm finally passes and you're still standing. A few quiet weeks passed, and life started to feel normal again. Work was steady, and my evenings were calm. I'd stopped thinking about Mila completely. Then one afternoon, I came home to find a thick envelope sitting in my mailbox. My name was printed neatly on the front, but the return address made my stomach drop. It was from a law office. Inside was a letter full of legal words that barely made sense at first. When I read it slowly, I realized Mila had filed a lawsuit against me. She was claiming emotional distress and property loss. The words felt unreal. She was accusing me of ruining her life after everything she'd done to mine. I sat at the table, staring at the papers, part angry, part exhausted. I took a deep breath and reminded myself that fear was exactly what she wanted. She had always relied on control, but this time I had proof. I gathered the documents I had been keeping, the lease in my name, photos of the damage, and the recordings where she admitted to changing locks and selling my things. I made copies of everything and contacted my lawyer. When I explained the situation, he listened quietly, then smiled slightly. "She doesn't have a case," he said. "You did everything by the book. We'll handle it." The court process took weeks, and though it was stressful, I stayed calm. Mila didn't show up in person the first time, just sent her lawyer. But eventually, she appeared at a hearing, sitting across from me with that same fake confidence she'd always had. She looked different though, tired, pale, and defensive. Her lawyer spoke first, saying I'd thrown her out without warning, that she'd lost valuable items, that I'd caused her emotional pain. I said nothing, letting my lawyer handle it. When it was my turn, we presented the evidence, the signed lease, the eviction papers, the text messages, and the audio recordings. Hearing her own voice played aloud in the courtroom was enough to make her face turn red. When the judge asked if she had anything to say, Mila mumbled something about misunderstandings. But it was clear the case was falling apart. The judge dismissed her claims completely and ordered her to pay the court fees. Walking out of that courtroom, I felt lighter than I had in a long time. It wasn't about winning money or proving a point. It was about finally ending what she had started. She couldn't touch my life anymore. A few days later, Evan called. His voice was quiet but firm. "I told her never to contact me again," he said. "She tried to get me to testify against you. I told her the truth instead." I didn't know what to say for a moment. "That must have been hard," I finally said. "It was," he admitted. "But it felt right. I see now what she really is. You were only trying to protect me." I thanked him and told him I was glad he was free of her too. After the call, I sat by the window, watching the sun set over the city. The light spread across the walls I had painted, the ones that finally felt like mine. For the first time in months, I didn't feel the need for revenge. The win in court didn't feel like payback. It felt like closure. She had tried to take everything from me, my home, my peace, even my brother. But in the end, all she lost was the power she thought she had. I looked around my quiet apartment, the space that had seen so much chaos, and realized something important. Taking your life back isn't about hurting the people who wronged you. It's about standing firm until they can't hurt you anymore. Mila was gone, her lies exposed, her grip broken. And I was still here, stronger than before, in the home that was always mine. The days after the court case felt quiet, almost too quiet. For the first time in a long time, there was no drama waiting for me when I got home, no tension hanging in the air. The apartment was calm, filled only with the soft hum of the refrigerator and the sound of my footsteps on clean floors. I had spent months fighting to get this peace, and now that it was finally here, it felt unfamiliar but good. Evan started reaching out more often. He called once a week just to talk, sometimes stopping by with groceries or takeout. He looked different now, steadier, clearer. He had found a job at a local repair shop and seemed proud of it. We didn't talk much about the past. There wasn't a need to. Every small conversation was its own kind of healing. One Saturday, he came over to help me fix a loose kitchen cabinet. As he worked, he looked around and said, "You've done a lot here. It feels peaceful." I smiled a little. "That's the point." He nodded, tightening a screw. "I still can't believe how much I let happen. But I'm trying to do better." "I know," I said quietly. "And I believe you will." When he left that evening, I stood by the door a long time after it closed. The sound of his footsteps fading down the hall wasn't painful anymore. It was just normal, the sound of someone who finally understood where they belonged. In the evenings, I started spending time on the small balcony outside my living room. I'd sit there with a cup of tea, watching the city lights blink on one by one. The view wasn't special, just rooftops and streetlights, but it felt like freedom. The kind that comes when you stop living in fear of what someone else might take from you. I bought a few plants and hung new curtains, soft gray ones that moved gently with the wind. I even framed the old photo of me and Evan as kids, the one I'd found in a box months ago. It now sat on the bookshelf near the door, a quiet reminder that love doesn't have to mean losing yourself. Sometimes I thought about everything that had happened, the lies, the shouting, the months of feeling like a guest in my own home. It used to make me angry. Now, it just made me grateful that I had survived it. I learned that being kind didn't mean letting people walk over me. That forgiveness didn't mean forgetting. And that protecting what's mine isn't selfish. It's necessary. One evening, after finishing dinner, I stepped outside onto the balcony again. The sky was fading into a dark blue, and the air smelled faintly of rain. I sat quietly, feeling the breeze against my face, and thought about how different life had become. My home wasn't just a place anymore. It was proof that I could take back control, no matter how much someone tried to break me. When I finally went inside, I walked to the front door and ran my hand over the lock, the one I had replaced myself. It gleamed faintly under the hallway light. I slipped the key into it, turned it once, and felt the smooth click that had once meant so much more than just security. A small smile tugged at my lips. "This time," I whispered to the quiet apartment, "no one's taking it from me." The lights glowed softly around the room, and the air felt calm. Everything was in its place, steady, safe mine. For the first time in months, I didn't feel like I had to look over my shoulder or guard every inch of my life. I had learned to draw my lines and keep them firm. And as I stood there, key still in hand, I realized something simple but powerful. Peace doesn't come when everything's perfect. It comes when you finally choose yourself and never apologize for it again.